The silence was absolute. Not a bird chirped, not a single cricket signaled the dawn. There was only the sound of their own ragged breathing and the rhythmic, hollow thud of their boots on the dying earth. "Do you hear that?" Sarah stopped dead, tilting her head. Rachel listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, a sound drifted from the direction of the manor, a rhythmic, grinding noise, like stone rubbing against wet earth, punctuated by a wet, clicking sound that set Rachel's teeth on edge. "Something's in the garden," Rachel breathed, her voice barely a tremor. "Or the house is moving," Sarah replied, her pragmatic mind searching for a logical explanation and finding nothing but madness. She pulled her flashlight out, clicking it on. The beam was a pathetic, narrow sliver of light against the oppressive, swirling fog. The light hit something in the distance, a flicker of movement near the overgrown gate. It was a shape, tall and impossibly thin, moving with a fluid, unnatural grace that defied the anatomy of a living thing. It vanished behind a thicket of dead rhododendrons before Rachel could focus on it. "Did you see?" "I saw," Sarah said, her voice descending into a cold, lethal calm. She moved in front of Rachel, her posture shifting from that of a cautious student to someone bracing for a fight. The evolution in her movement was subtle, yet absolute. She wasn't just Sarah the pragmatist anymore. She was a girl who had finally accepted that the monster was not just in the shadows, it was surrounding them. "We stay close," Sarah commanded, her eyes locked on the darkness ahead. "If anything moves, we run. We don't ask questions, we don't look for ghosts, we move." Rachel nodded, falling into step behind her. Her curiosity was still there, a hot ember in her chest, but it was now tempered by a cold, sharp instinct to survive. As they pushed through the final layer of dense shrubbery, the Blackwood Manor finally revealed itself in its entirety. It was a sprawling, Gothic monstrosity of rotting wood and weeping stone, its windows like sightless, cataract-filmed eyes reflecting nothing. The front yard was littered with the remnants of what looked like a long-forgotten party, rusted chairs, shattered glass, and long ribbons of black silk caught in the thorns, flapping in a breeze that shouldn't have existed. "It's waiting," Rachel murmured, her hand drifting to her pocket. "Let it wait," Sarah replied, stepping onto the cracked flagstone path that led to the porch. "Let's see what's inside." As they stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned, a deep, resonant sound like a dying animal. The air here was colder, freezing the moisture in their breath into tiny, jagged crystals. The front door, a towering slab of dark, scarred oak, sat slightly ajar. A single sliver of absolute, impenetrable darkness spilled out from the opening, inviting them into the belly of the beast. Rachel reached for the door, her fingers trembling. This was the precipice. The moment where the thrill of the hunt became the reality of the prey. She looked back at the forest, but the path was gone. There was only the manor, the fog, and the suffocating realization that the world they had known, the world of schools, and rumors, and harmless urban legends, had been left behind the moment they crossed those stones. Together, Sarah whispered, her hand finding Rachel's. Rachel took a breath, the cold air burning her lungs, and pushed the door open. The splintered wood of the front door yielded with a groan that sounded uncomfortably like a human throat clearing. Rachel didn't hesitate, her flashlight beam cutting a jagged, trembling path into the gloom. Sarah followed a half-step behind, her hand gripping the back of Rachel's jacket so tightly her knuckles shone bone-white. "Rachel, wait," Sarah whispered, her voice tight. "Look at the floor." Rachel lowered the beam. The grand foyer wasn't just dusty, it was staged. A velvet runner, moth-eaten, and stained with a dark, iron-smelling fluid, stretched toward a grand staircase that seemed to lean at an impossible, predatory angle. Scattered across the runner were personal effects, a shattered smartphone, a single leather loafer, a silver locket pried open to reveal nothing but a void. "This isn't an abandoned historical site," Sarah said, her pragmatic mask finally cracking. "This is a collection. We need to go. Now." Rachel froze, her gaze caught on the locket. She felt a phantom tug at the base of her skull, an electromagnetic pull that prickled her skin. They didn't just leave, Sarah. They were kept. Exactly. And we are currently guests in someone's trophy room. Turn around. Forget the legend, forget the Red Room theories. We are leaving. Before Rachel could argue, a sound echoed from the rafters, a wet, rhythmic thumping, like a heavy heart beating against wooden ribs. The air in the foyer curdled, dropping 10 degrees in a heartbeat. Rachel's flashlight flickered, the LED bulb dimming as if the darkness in the house was literally consuming the light. It's not just the house, Rachel murmured, her adventurous curiosity curdling into a sharp, icy dread. It's hungry. She moved toward the staircase, drawn by an unseen gravity. As she stepped onto the first riser, the architecture groaned. The walls didn't just creak, they breathed. Plaster cracked in long, vein-like fissures, and the wallpaper peeled back to reveal rotted laths that looked suspiciously like teeth. Rachel, get off the stairs. Sarah lunged forward, grabbing Rachel's arm. As soon as their combined weight shifted, the foyer surged. The walls seemed to draw inward, the hallway elongating into a tunnel of shadow. The silence of the manor was replaced by a low-frequency hum that vibrated in their marrow, a sound of ancient machinery grinding into motion. Rachel shook Sarah off, her eyes wide, reflecting a newfound, frantic intensity. Do you feel that? It's not just a trap, Sarah. It's a map. It wants us to go deeper. It wants to kill us. Sarah shouted, her voice echoing too long in the expanding space. Stop acting like this is a game. I'm not. Rachel snapped, spinning to face her friend. For a split second, her eyes seemed to catch the dying flashlight beam with a feline, unnatural luminescence. I'm trying to see it. If we run, we're just prey. If we understand how it moves, maybe we can survive it. A door at the end of the hall, a heavy, iron-bound oak monstrosity, swung open on its own. Behind it lay nothing but a suffocating, velvet-black void. From the darkness, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound emerged, followed by the distinct, metallic click of a deadbolt sliding into place. The foyer door, behind them, slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the dust from the chandelier, which swayed violently overhead. Sarah slammed her shoulder against the entrance, but it was solid, immovable, as if the wood had merged with the stone foundation. She pounded on the panels, her fingers bruising instantly. Locked, Sarah whispered, the word hollow. It's fully locked. Rachel didn't look at the door. She was staring at the wall where the wallpaper had torn away. Beneath the rot, carved into the very skeleton of the manor, were symbols, shifting, swirling sigils that looked like charred flesh. It's not just a house, Rachel repeated, her voice hushed, devoid of its former thrill-seeking bravado. It's a stomach. She reached out, her trembling fingers hovering inches from the wall. The house reacted. A gust of stagnant, freezing air rushed past them, smelling of ozone and dried blood. The shadows in the corners of the room detached themselves, stretching long, spindly fingers toward the center of the foyer. Sarah grabbed a heavy iron fire poker from the stand by the fireplace, her knuckles white. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Rachel, her body coiled, ready to fight for a life she suddenly realized was hanging by a thread. Whatever is in here, Sarah said, her voice dropping into a dangerous, steady rhythm. It picked the wrong two people to starve. Rachel finally turned, her face pale, the curiosity now replaced by a predatory, survivalist alertness. We don't fight it the way it expects, Sarah. We go through the belly. She pointed toward the open, void-filled door at the end of the hall. The house shifted again, a sickening crunch of timber and stone, rearranging the staircase so that it no longer led up, but spiraled downward into the bowels of the manor. The cellar, Sarah realized, her voice trembling. That's where the heart is. Then that's where we start, Rachel said. She took a breath, the air thick with the copper scent of old death, and stepped off the rug. As her boot touched the shifting floor, the manor let out a low, satisfied rumble. The hunt had begun. The grand foyer of Blackwood Manor smelled of wet charcoal and something sweeter, the cloying, metallic scent of dried blood hidden deep within the floorboards. Rachel stepped across the threshold, her flashlight beam cutting a jagged path through the swirling dust motes. She moved with the fluid, predatory grace she still hadn't quite reconciled with her own limbs, her fingers twitching at her sides, itching to reach for a shadow that didn't belong to any object in the room. Sarah followed, her boots crunching on glass shards that glittered like diamonds in the gloom. She kept her back to the wall, her gaze darting toward the ornate, rotting staircase that spiraled upward into a throat of absolute black. "It's too quiet, Ratch," Sarah whispered. Her voice lacked its usual sharp, pragmatic edge. It sounded thin, brittle, like parchment about to tear. Even the wind stopped outside. "It's like the house is holding its breath." Rachel didn't stop. She pushed deeper into the foyer, her eyes tracking the peeling wallpaper that looked uncomfortably like bruised skin. "It's not quiet, Sarah. It's waiting. David didn't just build a trap, he built a stomach. And we're currently walking down its gullet." Before Sarah could respond, the massive oak front door, the only tether to the world they'd just left, slammed shut with the force of a thunderclap. The sound vibrated through the floor, rattling the teeth in their skulls. A heavy, iron-wrought bolt slid home with a screech of rusted metal, sealing them inside. The darkness that followed wasn't merely the absence of light, it was a physical weight, a dense, pressurized atmosphere that pressed against their ears. Rachel spun around, her flashlight beam flicking wildly. She slammed her palm against the wood. It didn't budge. It didn't even vibrate. It felt solid, as if the door had fused with the very frame of the house, becoming a permanent part of the foundation. "Locked," Rachel said, her voice dropping into a guttural, jagged register she didn't recognize. "Try the handle again." "Force it," Sarah said, though her voice betrayed her. She stepped up beside Rachel, her hand trembling as she reached for the iron latch. It was freezing, coated in a layer of unnatural, rime-like frost. She pulled, then braced her shoulder against the wood and pushed with the strength that had been gifted to her by the ritual. The door didn't groan. It didn't splinter. It remained as immovable as a mountain. "It's not wood anymore," Sarah muttered, pulling back and wiping her hand on her jeans. "It feels like stone. Or bone." Rachel took a step back, the adrenaline of the hunt beginning to override the creeping dread. She tapped into that new, dark well of power. The shadow manipulation Lara had warned them was a double-edged sword. She focused on the gap between the door and the frame. She reached out with her mind, searching for the shadows she could usually bend, trying to find a leverage point. Usually, the shadows responded to her command, flowing like liquid smoke. Here, they were static. They clung to the corners of the room like starving things, refusing to move, refusing to obey. "The architecture," Rachel said, her breath hitching. "Sarah, look at the geometry." Sarah turned, sweeping her own light across the foyer. The house was changing. The proportions were wrong. The grand staircase, which had been directly in front of them moments ago, now seemed to be leaning at an impossible, sickening angle. The hallway to their left, which should have led to the library, had lengthened, its end disappearing into a twilight haze that defied the laws of physics. The house wasn't just a building, it was an organ. It was digesting them. "It's rearranging," Sarah whispered, her pragmatism finally snapping under the weight of the impossible. "It's moving the exits. It's forcing us deeper into the center." "Then we don't go back," Rachel said, her eyes glowing with a faint, bioluminescent violet. She drew her combat knife, a pathetic tool against the horror they were facing, but a comfort nonetheless. "We go through. If this thing wants us in the middle, we'll give it the middle. We'll tear the guts out of this house until it lets us out." "That's suicide," Sarah argued, though she moved to stand back to back with Rachel. "If we play by its rules, we lose. We have to find a way to anchor ourselves." Lyra told us the manor feeds on our fear, on the psychic energy of the ritual. If we stop acting like prey... I'm done acting like prey, Rachel interrupted. She turned to the foyer's center, where a massive, dust-covered chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling. As she watched, the chandelier shifted, the crystals chiming like funeral bells. A dark, viscous liquid, not blood, but something thicker, like motor oil, began to drip from the ceiling, landing on the floorboards with a sickening thrum. The air grew impossibly cold. The house let out a low, resonant groan, a sound that wasn't structural, but vocal. It was a mournful, hungry sound that vibrated in the marrow of their bones. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her hand moving to the small silver charm Lyra had given them. "That wasn't just the house settling. It's the entity," Rachel hissed. "David's masterpiece. It's waking up because we're here. We're the conduits, Sarah. It wants our blood to finish the awakening." They stood in the center of the dark foyer, two monsters in the making, surrounded by an architecture that existed to consume them. The foyer seemed to expand, the walls stretching away until they were no longer in a room, but in a vast, subterranean cavern of rot and splintered memories. Suddenly, the floor beneath them dropped an inch, then settled. From the darkness above the staircase, a sound emerged, not a scream, but a wet, rhythmic clicking, like a dozen spiders skittering across dry leaves. "It's coming," Sarah said, her voice hardening. She stood firm, her senses heightening, the vampiric hunger within her finally overriding her fear. She felt the shadow in her heart, the cold, boundless void that David had tried to control. "Let it come. I'm tired of running." Rachel bared her teeth, a faint, predatory hiss escaping her lips. The foyer wasn't a tomb, it was an arena. She dropped the flashlight, letting the darkness consume the room. She didn't need it anymore. She could see the pulses of energy within the walls, the veins of black magic running through the studs and joists like a circulatory system. "To the right," Rachel whispered, her senses locking onto a ripple in the darkness. "The library. There's a tear in the veil there, I can feel the cold coming through." "Lead the way," Sarah replied. They moved in unison, drifting through the oppressive dark like ghosts, their boots making no sound on the decaying wood. The house tried to confuse them, twisting the halls and shifting the doors, but they pushed forward, guided by the instinct of their new nature. They were no longer lost teenagers. They were the apex predators in a house of cards, and they were ready to bring the whole structure crashing down.